Hello and welcome to CNP in a Colorado reservoir. In this video, we're going to talk about how phosphorus moved through Johnson Reservoir, which is a real lake in Colorado, but I changed the name for security reasons. We'll look at where the phosphorus comes from, how it's used by living things, how it affects the living ecosystem, and where it goes after it leaves the ecosystem. Phosphorus is a nutrient that plants and algae need to grow. It moves through the lake in this sort of a cycle. You get the inputs, which are things like fertilizer, pet waste, dead leaves, or animal droppings that might go directly into the lake, other than the case of the fertilizer. But largely, much of it comes through the larger watershed that then flows downstream and ends up into the lake. Phosphorus is then used by algae and plants in the lake in order to grow. And this affects the lake in that when the algae dies, little organisms like bacteria break them down. This is called mineralization, which turns dead materials back into nutrients. Outputs, phosphorus leaves the system when water flows out of the lake, where it sinks down into the mud and gets stuck, or people catch fish and take them home, or through things like drinking pretty much anything that takes water or takes something that has taken in that mineral out of the water. So stoichiometry, I will be upfront, chemistry is not my forte, but as best as I can understand, living things need different amounts of carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, or CNP. Algae needs lots of phosphorus, so they have what's called a low CP ratio, or a low carbon to phosphorus ratio. Means that they have a certain amount of carbon, but they need a ton of phosphorus in order to live and maintain and all of that stuff. Dead leaves have a lot of carbon, but not much phosphorus. Therefore, it's a high carbon to phosphorus ratio. And then bacteria need a little bit more of a balance so they can grow and recycle the nutrients. This is really important when you're understanding the effect of too much or too little phosphorus in this case, a reservoir. If there's too little, then that prevents the algae from thriving, which then slows down the bacteria, which then slows down the recycling of the dead materials in the water. If there is too much phosphorus in the water, then that means the algae explodes, and there's a ton of algae in the water, but that does two really harmful things in the reservoir. One, it takes up all the oxygen and essentially chokes out the fish. And two, it blocks all the sunlight and essentially kills the underwater plants that depended on that sunlight. So it's kind of a situation where you want not too little, not too much. In this particular reservoir, there doesn't seem to be a huge amount of phosphorus because there isn't a ton of algae. A lot of this has to do with industrial farming and the use of fertilizers in that, because of the way that a lot of farming is done in conventional farming. For example, monocrops, which deplete the soil, which require the farmers to put more and more CNP into the soil in order to produce the same amount of food. But that a lot of that ends up running off downstream and then changing the chemistry of the lakes downstream. Some of the ways that can be fixed on a larger level is slowly changing the way that we are doing large scale farming. There are larger operations that use closed systems such as aquaponics or hydroponics that don't have a downstream effect, or at least in the same way, because they are a closed system. Everything gets reused in that same system. Or there are options such as permaculture principles that can be applied to essentially rebuild the soil, increase the ability of the soil to soak up the extra nutrients that were there or were being put there with the extra chemicals. Long term, the idea is to reduce the need for those chemicals. So this is a little bit more of a long-term plan and a larger picture. What we can do, our lawn fertilizer or our pet waste runoff, we can use less fertilizer or choose stuff with no phosphorus. We can plant grass or plants along the shoreline if we live along the shoreline or we have the authority to do so. We can clean up our pet waste so it doesn't wash into the lake. This has been CNP in a Colorado reservoir, at least as well as I understood it. Thank you so much.